Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In Titus chapter 1 and verse 5 it says, "For this reason I left you in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you." Here, as much as Titus would have very much liked to have been with the Apostle Paul, he had to remain in Crete so that elders could be appointed in every church. This was something that was still lacking in the churches at Crete, and Titus was left to make sure that this took place. And so he was left there. And this is typical to how the Apostle Paul would go about his missionary work. Typically, he would go into a particular location. He'd preach the gospel, and then he'd find people who had come to faith in the Lord, and he would establish a church. But then they would kind of stay under his guidance, over his oversight, until they could mature enough and have their own leaders. And then he would appoint elders that would then carry on the work. And then the Apostle Paul could then turn his attention to other places. And this seems to be what's going on here in Crete as well. The gospel has been preached, churches have been established, they have now matured to the point that they can now have their own leadership. And the Apostle Paul is wanting Titus to go about this work and to facilitate this appointment of the elders. And as we think about this situation, we can think about our own personal lives as well, because, as the Apostle Paul recognized that there was something that was lacking, and then he sent Titus to set it in order, we can kind of look in our own lives and see that oftentimes, if we think really hard about it, we can see that there are things that are amiss in our lives, some things that are lacking, some things that remain in our own lives that need taking care of. And oftentimes we let these things carry on too long. Maybe for years we say, "I wish I had a better prayer life." Or maybe for years we say, "I wish I was better about getting into God's word." Or maybe for years we say, "You know what, I wish I was better about having quiet time with the Lord." Whatever it might be a whole array of different things. But these are things that we know and have known for quite some time, that these are things that remain, these are things that need to be taken care of, and yet we don't set them in order. And in the spiritual life, it's very important that we set in order those things that remain. Where we're talking about in a local church, or we're talking about in our own personal lives, there are things in our lives that, or when we come across these things in our lives that are amiss, it's very important that we set them in order. Sometimes we think that, or it's possible that we might think that the spiritual life is completely and absolutely spontaneous. If I want to have a better prayer life, then I just kind of wait around until spontaneously I have a better prayer life. Or we think, well, I want to be better about getting into God's word, and so we kind of wait around until spontaneously we're in God's word more. And there is a lot to the spiritual life being spontaneous. There's a lot of spontaneity in the spiritual life, but usually that those spontaneous moments come out of structured times. That is, us setting things in order. In other words, it's when we set aside time to be with the Lord that spontaneously we feel his peace and his presence within us. It's when we set in order to get into the word that spontaneously wisdom and truth begin to arise in our hearts. It's when we set in order times of prayer to dedicate our hearts to the Lord that we spontaneously begin to draw close to the Lord. Spontaneity in the spiritual life oftentimes springs out of the things that we have set in order. It's kind of like a drink needs a container to contain it so that we can drink of the water. And so it is often with the spiritual disciplines, the things that we set in order in our lives, to set it up to where then the Lord can come and fill our hearts, and the Lord can come and fill our souls and our desires and refresh us and renew us in that way. And so we should begin to take very seriously these areas in our lives that still remain a bit shaky, and areas in our lives that still need attention. And say, you know what, I'm no longer going to just wait around until these things begin to arise in my life, but I'm going to set them in order. I'm going to set aside time with the Lord. I'm going to set aside time to get into the word. I'm going to have a strategy. I'm going to have a plan for praying more, for worshiping God more, whatever it is that we need to, pay attention to, and set it in order. Be intentional, make a plan, be strategic in making these things and implementing these things in our lives. And in doing so, we can have greater success in drawing closer to the Lord and living a life more in the Spirit, and living a life more pleasing to the Lord. So these are things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.